This segment we're going to cover reinstalling the hoses. As we took it apart earlier and got the valve cover back on and the wires back on, we're down to the 2 hoses, crankcase ventilation and crankcase breather, and 1 ground wire. A note or tip, this ground wire is an additional ground wire to ensure that the vehicle has proper engine grounding. So prior to installing it, just make sure the contacts are clean, not damaged or corroded prior to installing it. And as you remember, it's connected with a 10mm head that we removed earlier. And I always start them by hand. I don't use a ratchet or driver to install the nut. If you do it by finger, it makes it very difficult to cross thread that nut. You don't have the necessary strength in your fingers to put it in and twist a bolt and cross thread it in a hole. So I always try and start my bolts and nuts by hand, and that ensures that they go on correctly and they're not cross-threaded. And just run them down by hand, and you can use your fasteners or ratchets, wrenches, and other devices to tighten them down with. And just snug it down, and after it's tight, just a little additional twist and ensure that it's on there good and correct and tight. And we have 2 hoses left. Our PCV hose, which we held back in the engine earlier. You want to check it and make sure that it's clean, free of any damage. If you have some fresh, clean engine oil, and put a little bit of oil or lubricant on your finger, because it's going to slide into a rubber grommet, it helps to ensure that it slides in a little bit easier and doesn't tear the grommet. In this case, I'm going to use a little bit of silicone because it works good as a lubricant, and then it will dry and seal up and ensure that we've got a good seal. And all we need to do is just barely moisten that up. It doesn't take a lot. We're not using it so much as it's for its sealing, but more of a lubricant. And just snap it down into that rubber grommet. The crankcase ventilation hose, which we laid aside and out of the way earlier. Check it inside for cracks and cleanliness, make sure it's free of debris. It slides down over the nipple, and then we have to apply that spring clamp that we removed earlier. And using a standard pair of pliers, just compress that clamp and slide it down over the nipple, release it, ensure that it clamped tightly and the hose is correctly on. And that concludes installing the hoses. At this time, we've successfully removed valve cover gasket and replaced the gaskets and the necessary components required to do so. In conclusion, we'll need to start the vehicle, bring it up to operating temperature, let it run for about 5–10 minutes, and make sure that there are no leaks and everything operates correctly. Please watch our next segment on checking for leaks.